This show is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. The content on this show is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such condition.
This is Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton, exploring the science of functional medicine and the power of healing from within. Breathe in. Breathe out. And now your host, Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hi, this is Dr. Beth Claxton. Thank you so much for tuning in to Rooted in Healing. Today we have a very interesting interview. I have been following John O'Connor for several years now. I have purchased his product, which is My Gene Food, nutrigenomic analysis that has looked at all of my genetics, my raw data, we call it, and looked at all the genes that his company looks at and recommended a diet for me. As I've grown to know John by reading his blogs, listening to his podcast, I've learned that he and I share a lot of similar genetics. So I was very eager to get him on the telephone and have an interview with him. And indeed we do share a lot of genetic similarities. And one of the things that I've learned in functional medicine is that those of us that are in the field, we are digging, and we get to a point where we hit a rock, a hard place, and we can't quite get past that. And then we start asking questions and going to other people and looking at specialists in the area that we're stuck in. Like maybe they have the answer. Maybe they have been able to go a little bit deeper with this. And what I learned talking to John in this interview is that we're all starting to get stuck on the same spot. And this is specifically in the area of lipid metabolism or our cholesterol metabolism. I do believe there are a few people out there that are starting to work around this. But I definitely learned for my patients one more step that John taught me. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a sec. And knowing and sharing with you that we are investigating and finding a lot of answers that maybe Western medicine or what your primary care doctor has told you, like, there really isn't any more we can do here. We've dug past that, but we are starting to hit on a hard place. And that hard place is LDL. LDL metabolism, there are a couple of pathways that can make LDL. There's some people who metabolize sugar in such a way that it goes through the liver and genetically triggers a higher LDL number. There are some people whose glucose and sugar metabolism is fine, but they may be high absorbers of LDL so that their LDL numbers are high. There's some people that metabolize it beautifully, and I'm sure that there are some people that are high absorbers and have impaired glucose metabolism, and their numbers are really high. So what do we do? What is it that we can do to help people in this arena? Sometimes there isn't just a natural solution. Sometimes you can do every single thing right on the diet, and we still may need some medications. And it was really helpful to hear John say this as well. So as I work with my clients and understanding the difficulties that people have on statin therapy, understanding that many people are not put on the support called CoQ10, which is a supplement that everyone who's on a statin should be taking because statins do deplete our CoQ10 levels. There may be people who necessarily don't need a statin or don't want to be on a statin that we can try so many other things for, and then in the end, they may need to be taking something. Another area of this lipid metabolism is people who genetically make lipoprotein, which is a molecule made of fat, lipo, and protein, which is an LDL or an HDL or a VLDL molecule. They're all types of lipoproteins. This one is called lipoprotein a. It's highly inflammatory. It's carried in about 25 to 30% of people, and it tends to be Northern European people that have that gene. And now that we're such an enormous melting pot, like who knows exactly where it's coming from, but it tends to be from Northern European sources. That finding does not have a medication that will help combat it. They are under research, like frantically, trying to find something that will help alleviate the burden of lipoprotein a, which seems to be super highly inflammatory in the blood vessels. So that, as a very detailed, hopefully didn't get you too confused intro, the bottom line in that is we are trying to do things naturally, and sometimes you just bump up against a hard place that medications really are necessary. And with that, we'll be right back to more Rooted in Healing on Mellow Mountain Radio, 106.5 FM and 780 AM.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hi, and welcome back. We have with us now John O'Connor. John is the founder of Gene Food. He's passionate about nutrition, genetics, and startups. Gene Food combines all of these interests into one project. And he couldn't be more excited to get his message of personalized nutrition out to the public. So he is the founder of Gene Food and an integrative health coach. He was trained at Duke Integrative Medicine. After his career in the New York City startup world left him stressed, burned out, and physically sick, John turned his focus to understanding as much as he could about health and how his body works. When he looked for the ideal diet, all he encountered was wildly conflicting nutrition advice. John created Gene Food to help people sift through the noise and eat in a way that is suited to their individual needs. And John completed a 200-hour yoga teacher training under Gerhard Gessner, a member of the faculty at University of San Diego, as well as the proprietor of Prana Yoga in La Jolla, California. And through this, John learned that yoga is far more than just the asana practice, and the science of yoga can be applied to all facets of life. And I found this fascinating that John mixed in New York City startup, genetics, health coaching, and yoga. So welcome, John. So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Beth. It's really a pleasure.
Oh, you're welcome. So I'd love for you to expound on your story a little bit. Like how did you get so into genetics, and what led you to the genetic part of it?
Well, yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. I spent many years living in New York City. New York City is a city that I love quite a bit, and always felt like I fit in well there. Mm-hmm. But the one of the benefits of New York is it gives you this incredible energy, mm-hmm. and one of the downsides is it can really burn you out.
Yes.
And so after many years in New York, I found myself leaving and just looking for balance, and I had all sorts of just smoldering imbalance. It's just not feeling great, mm-hmm. I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And I went to Southern California. I went to San Diego. I had some good friends out there, mm-hmm. and one of the people that I met early in my health journey was an endocrinologist who was very interested in anti-aging and advanced lab testing, and he would run Boston Heart Diagnostic panels.
Mm-hmm.
And Boston Heart Diagnostics is a lab provider that I love because we can get into this later in the conversation, but they run sterile panels, which is a very rare way to diagnose the cause of dyslipidemia. But in my case, I saw that they had some basic genetic stuff, and I saw that they had MTHFR and a couple other genetic markers. And as I discussed these panels with my physician at the time, I was fascinated by the idea that the nutrients that we eat, that micronutrients, can influence the enzymatic performance of genetics. They can literally change sort of how a gene is expressed and, how our bodies function. I just became very interested in that, just as an intellectual pursuit. And I worked with some San Diego is very rich in biotech talent, and there's a lot of brilliant people there. And I compiled a list of nutrigenomic genetic markers and quote unquote SNPs or mutations, and really just to scratch my own itch. I was curious just how deep the rabbit hole went, and that's how my interest in genetics started. And those were the very early days of the Gene Food product, which we created in 2018.
Okay. Wow, that's fascinating. So it was really just to scratch your own itch, and it's ended up serving so many people.
Yeah, well, because as I mentioned, when you get on the wrong side of your health, and there are different reasons why people in today's fast-paced, very tech-forward culture find themselves in that place. And there's a myriad of reasons why you can end up there. You're looking for concrete answers, and what you tend to find is none of them. None. Often there's very few concrete answers. And what I was just looking for, I had been living this sort of, drinking a little bit too much red wine, not being careful about what I ate, and a little bit too much pizza, and just being casual about food. And I realized sort of intuitively that one of the things that I really needed to address was taking nutrition more seriously. And when you come to that realization, and then you go into that world, you find so much conflicting advice. And the nutrition conversation is starting to map to it's almost mapping to the level of our politics. I mean, it's quite acrimonious, and the different competing circles of nutrition are really kind of yelling at each other into the void. And what gets lost in the shuffle are people who are looking for not every answer, not every single thing that they need to, but just directionally, give me a map and show me which way should I start walking at least, Yeah. And I found even that was quite difficult. And so I decided that I would create a scoring algorithm of my own that could just kind of divide people into broad diet types and could kind of use that as a starting point. It's something that, that we still do to this day.
Yeah. So I'd love to discuss my own journey with my gene food analysis. So I signed up with Gene Food, and I put in my raw data, which at that time I had from 23andMe, and which isn't anymore. But you guys Gene Food will do your genetics for you, correct? They can do the testing.
Yeah, we have a lab partner, a CLIA certified lab partner.
Okay.
But we will also, as you mentioned, we also have quite a few users who have added their raw data from third-party providers like 23andMe or Ancestry.
Right. And then I received a food plan that recommended how I ate. And it was fascinating to me to look at that and realize this is what I gravitate to naturally. And I'm a Wyoan, which is basically vegetarian, low fat, and fish. It's like a very Mediterranean type diet. Would you agree?
Yeah, so the Wyoan diet was inspired by, yes, I would agree. That's right. It's a macrobiotic template. It's inspired by a friend of mine whose nickname is Wyo, Eduardo Longoria, who's the founder of a macrobiotic community center in Austin, Texas, called Casa de Luz, which is really one of the coolest places, one of the coolest nutrition communities that I've encountered. They serve 3 macrobiotic meals. Everybody eats the same meal each day, and I named one of the gene food diet types after him. That's also my diet type.
Nice.
And it is. It's a macrobiotic, lower fat, whole food template of eating. Yeah.
Okay, so I started wondering, like, how many different types of diets are there that get handed out to various people based on their genes? I was thinking maybe 20. How many types of diets are there?
Well, our system is unique in that we are. You could describe the diet type part of the product as almost like a Myers-Briggs for nutrition. So we have 20 diet types that we will divide people into, and it generally divides along fat metabolism, saturated fat metabolism, polyunsaturated fat metabolism, your ApoE4 status, your glycemic response, which is essentially like blood sugar control, how well you do with carbohydrate sources, lactose, and then we also have in the core scoring algorithm something I'm very interested in, which is histamine. So the histamine genetics are part of the core scoring algorithm. Some people that will be a dividing line for some of the different diet types.
That's so interesting. So people can be like us and need to eat this macrobiotic, low-fat diet. And then there's some people who, based on their genetics, can like go and eat one of those just carnivore diets and not think twice about it, right?
Well, like I said at the outset, it's like directionally.
Yes.
So the way we look at it is one of the things that I think is probably relatable to people is in terms of let's say like a saturated fat budget, right? It's like you have so much saturated fat budget in your wallet, like your dietary wallet. You and we have a more limited saturated fat budget. Our algorithm would predict that people like yourself and me, if we were to eat a diet that's really high in saturated fat, we're the type of person who sees our LDL cholesterol, the quote unquote bad cholesterol, go really high. Now, just as a little anecdote here, there's a study, it's a small study, but it is a randomized control trial that was done in Oslo, and I talk about it all the time. It's called Redderstall. The long and the short of it is they took 25 healthy adults and they put them on a Atkins style, very high fat, very low carb diet. And then they measured their biomarkers before and after. And what they found was the average increase in LDL cholesterol in this group was 44% versus their control, which was their normal diet. So the average person's LDL cholesterol increased by 44% on a high fat diet. But within that group, the individual variability was fascinating. And it varied between a 5% increase and a 107% increase. So part of what we're looking to do at Gene Food is we're looking to take a basket. It's called polygenic risk. So we're taking a polygenic approach. We're looking at a bunch of different genetic mutations, and then we're basically scoring you and saying, okay, here's the people who, as you said just now, who are more likely to see that 5% increase on a diet that's higher in fat. And here are the people who we would predict are more likely to see the 107% increase, right? Or are going to see a more, and we're trying to divide them up so that they're on notice. That at a foundational level, these are the pathways that they want to flag, and as they personalize their eating.
Right. And we all know, like I talk to my patients, we all know that our family histories, and we know who has like significant cardiovascular risk or lipid risk in their family. And then they can be paired up with a partner who's on a keto diet doing great and losing weight. And so that's why I love this product, is you can really get an insight into what's right for you instead of trying to find the social thing, the best social thing to do, or the thing to make your partner happy, or the thing to make your friend happy. You have something to stand on and defend yourself and follow that's right for you. Yeah,
and I guess just to riff on that is, I think of this concept of like the tyranny of the nutrition influencer, And what I would describe as the tyranny of the nutrition influencer, somebody who's very well-meaning and who has done a lot of work to try to figure out, why did I get out of balance? Why was I not feeling well? And what happens by accident is that the protocol that worked for that individual becomes the template for everyone.
Right.
And oftentimes, unfortunately, I wish it worked that way, but unfortunately what tends to happen is that you'll find people, a lot of times people come to us who have maybe fallen under the spell of one of the different diets, and they realize that they got really out of balance following diet A, B, or C, and it's very, people are very passionate. Everybody has to be vegan. Everybody has to be carnivore. Everybody should be eating keto. Everybody should be eating low carb. And what happens with some people is they just get very sick. And they need to go back to first principles, which is what you mentioned is a beautiful thing, which is intuitively, what do I already know about myself? Right. And, our parents were right when they told us, it's like, you're unique, you're special, you're an individual. And that's true of our styles of eating as well. Of course, a product like Gene Food doesn't answer every single question. It's not meant to create dogma or to be rigid, but the thing that I'll keep mentioning is you go on vacation, you see those signposts. Key West, 1,000 miles that way. Tokyo, 3,000 miles that way. We're trying to start with people by giving them a little bit of peace of mind and say, hey, let's point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
And then, that's empowering in and of itself.
Yeah, exactly. Just knowing your genetics, super helpful. Super helpful.
Yeah,
and then
it can be.
Yeah, it can be. And some people, I'd love to hear what you have to think about this. Some people get terrified by their genetics if they find out that they're ApoE44. They come to me like fasting for 20 hours a day. And I'm like, well, I don't know if that's the right thing, but have you found that this helps calm people down?
I could say two things to that, because again, and I'm speaking of this from somebody who's kind of been through the ringer with this. So I have a great deal of empathy for people who are struggling in this way, because I've been and in some times continue to be one of these people, right? It's a journey that we're all on to be healthy. Right. Our product is not built with scary genetics. Now, for some people, the concept of genetics is scary just across the board, and I fully respect that, right? And people just don't want to know. But right. Our product is not what I would call scary genetics. What I think of as scary genetics, and to be fair, scary genetics is also can be incredibly impactful, and we're very lucky to have access to this body of research which shows what would be called rare or novel variants. So you can have, if you go get your whole genome sequenced, you're going to be, one of the big use cases and reasons why you'd want to get your whole genome sequenced is to really look for rare and novel variants. You want to see disease risk, at a very granular level where it's almost like one gene mutation equals one disease. And that's true of cystic fibrosis, for example, and many others, or certain cancers. So we're not looking at markers like that. What we're looking at are, what I'm really passionate about and really interested in are, creating categories of risk based on mutations that are more common. Not common per se, but say, 5% of the population may carry, 15% of the population may carry. Some of the, methylation is a very hot topic right now. There's a lot of interest in genetic methylation testing. For a lot of this, the SNPs or, quote unquote mutations that are included in genetic methylation tests, these are markers that are carried by, 20, 30, 40% of the population. Right. And what you're doing is you're taking, 15 or 20 of these markers, and our team creates almost a mutual fund of risk. A mutual fund manager picks the stocks they want in their mutual fund. We pick the genes we want in our scoring, and we weight it. But if you find out you carry one of these mutations, you may have, it may concern some people, but the good news is that it's intended as something that's empowering, because there are things you can do something about, right? With rare or novel genetic variants, now as technology, goes on, we can maybe edit some of these genes and do things, but we're trying to build a product where, yes, you may find out that you carry a genetic variant or two that you're not super happy that you have. But we'd like to also have the next step be something empowering where you can go and you can do something about it. And so we're not reporting on like the high risk novel variants. We're reporting on things that are generally you can do something about more often.
Yeah. So I'd like to get into the topic of food and the epigenetic expression of these genes that we're talking about. And I know you have a nutritionist, a dietitian that works with you, correct?
Yeah, we have several people on.
Yeah.
Not a big team, but we have people on the team, yeah.
Yeah. Can you say a little bit about epigenetics and how they're changed, how they're modified by what we eat so people can feel empowered?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the concept of epigenetics is essentially just how previous generations will influence, the kind of the modern template. I mean, some people may find, like, for example, like my wife is from Japan. They have a very specific system of eating. There's a way that they eat and have eaten for a long time. My ancestors ate a different way. I mean, some people find that, if I'm not mistaken, I think Dr. Gundry, this is one of the things that Dr. Gundry wrote about one of his books. Some of your listeners may be Dr. Gundry fans, and wrote about how, epigenetics can play a role in terms of different food choices. If your ancestors didn't eat a ton of, quinoa or certain other types of foods, you may not thrive on those foods as well. That's definitely out there. And, yeah.
Oh, so I'm just getting what you're saying. Like, just what people ate generations ago are modifying our gene expression now 2-3 generations later.
I mean, from an epigenetic standpoint, yeah. I mean, that's certainly something that's out there in the zeitgeist that people are talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a patient that came to me recently whose grandparents were in the Holocaust on both sides. And she still has trauma issues. So it plays out so many different ways in the trauma that we carry from Holocaust survivor ancestors and what our ancestors ate. And the genetic expression in Native Americans who have a high incidence of diabetes and how the diabetic genes get turned on in their progeny.
Yeah. It all ties in. It's a bit of a rabbit hole, isn't it?
Yeah. So empowering people now to change what they're doing will change their progeny, like their children and their children's children. So it can be quite empowering.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I mean, and also one of the things with just diet in general and lifestyle that I'm very interested in is just, and some people will hear this and they can't relate, and then for the people who do relate, they can relate very deeply. But one of the reasons I think why, for example, like low carb diets have become so popular with people is that a lot of people find them as being very impactful for improving mental health. The food that we eat and the nutrition protocols that we go on, they can really affect, we're talking, of course, spanning generations, but even just kind of zeroing in on our lives, like they can affect the way that you show up mentally, the thoughts that you think, your overall approach and outlook on life. And I find that absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
You then touch on how, different locations can affect, how you show up as a person as well. And that's when it starts to get even more interesting.
You mean where you live?
Yeah, where you live physically. I like one of the things that I think is interesting about, as I mentioned, the histamine genes is that, certain histamine genetic markers are associated with, decreased ability to clear histamine from the gut, right? So if you have a, which quote unquote, like an ambient, air trigger, that's stimulating your immune system, and you're producing histamine, and then you combine that in that location where you're having trouble, you combine that with food, the combination of the two can lead to histamine intolerance and a whole world of symptoms and issues that a lot of people will experience and find, especially in middle age. The American Journal of Clinical Nutrition has written perhaps the best paper on the topic, and one of the things that they do mention are some of these genetic markers which are associated with lower levels of an enzyme called diamine oxidase,
right,
which sweeps out histamine from the gut. And if you have that predisposition and then you marry that up with an environment that you're poorly suited to, potentially epigenetically, potentially due to an inability to deal with a toxic burden, that can be a driver of downstream issues of food. And then the food gets blamed, but really what's at issue is the environment.
That's why I was going to ask you, like food sensitivity, it's not often about the food. It can be about the environment, right?
Well, yes. As you could probably guess, and what I alluded to at the beginning of the conversation is I think that there's probably too much certainty that's being people are expressing too much certainty in this space, I would say. And so I say this with humility. But I think that that in my opinion, one of the drivers of food sensitivity is very often environment, and the environment is the canonical piece, and people blame the food because it was sort of the messenger. It's kind of like blaming the messenger. They have a reaction to food, but the reason why they have their reaction to food is because their immune system is on high alert from some other source. And just so that people know, people at home who are thinking, well, I would love to see the citation on that. Well, I mean, one of the, of course, you can look in this body of literature about the AOC1 genes and the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, but you can also just look at a paper that was published by researchers at University of Texas El Paso titled "Toxicant-Induced Loss of Tolerance," which is a fascinating invitation to more research, which essentially talks about this generation, all of us, all of us on planet Earth right now, in different countries, and we're all confronting evolutionarily novel compounds.
Yes.
Right. So everybody knows the paleo movement. The paleo movement is saying, okay, I have IBS or I have a food sensitivity. I'm going to strip out inflammatory foods, right? So this would be the paleo movement, but for environment. And it says that, look, we are now at a point, the tip of the spear, where we are inheriting the consequences of, many years of exposure to inputs, whether it be, forever chemicals, whether it be glyphosate, whether it be, digital exposures, that we just as a species, you talk about epigenetics, I don't care what your background is. None of us have encountered this before.
Right.
And if you were to map out 100 people and basically score them for a strong ability to deal with these new inputs and these new compounds, and then people that have a lower ability, there's a growing number of people who feel that the reason why you're seeing an epidemic of autoimmunity and a lot of smoldering and subclinical and subdiagnostic health issues with people is because there are people who are in that bottom 30% who just aren't equipped to deal with these evolutionarily novel compounds, and it's showing up as these challenges that people are having, right? So that's something I'm fascinated by. Yeah,
and you're including EMFs in that, right?
What's more on my radar, I'm going to be agnostic on that. Okay. I'm sure that there are people for whom that's an issue. I wouldn't dismiss somebody who has an issue with that. But for me, what I would say is just that, like in the toxicant-induced loss of tolerance paper, the authors, they list 8 stimulating criteria. I wish they wouldn't have done that, because I think it excludes many that are probably relevant that then get excluded because they weren't listed. But the authors do talk about several, one of which is mold. Yeah. That's a huge one in the functional community. Right. And so we're still, I think we're still compiling like what these triggers are, but we do know that they're out there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to, in the time we have left, which is a nice chunk of time, I am super interested in your journey to yoga and what you found there and how it unfolded for you, because that's almost parallel to how I found functional medicine, was through a detox at my yoga studio.
Well, I'd be happy to chat about that.
Yeah.
When I came out to San Diego, this is we're coming full circle in this health journey that I was on and looking to change my environment and find a sort of a sunnier place, connect with friends. I stumbled across a yoga studio in San Diego called Prana Yoga, which is run by my friend Gerhard, and I'd been interested in yoga prior. I mean, it wasn't my first exposure to yoga. The first time I ever did yoga was actually in Miami. Miami has a phenomenal yoga community. At least it did at the time I was there. Yeah. And I just, Gerhard had this very calm and beautiful way of approaching yoga. It was very precise. He's German, very sort of precise. You're going to do it the right way, but you're going to do it at your own pace. Mm-hmm. And when I took his teacher training, we were given a copy of The Heart of Yoga by Krishnamacharya Desikachar, the son of Krishnamacharya. I forgot his first name, but the author's last name is Desikachar, which I think is one of the greatest books of any kind that I've ever read. And more so than even practicing asana these days, I'll refer back to that book sometimes. I mean, it's just I think it's a treasure trove of sort of like just wisdom.
Yeah.
And so
I'd love to expound on that also. So many people think yoga is stretching. Like, oh yeah, I do yoga because I stretch after I lift weights. But I'd love to dig into what really is yoga. It's not just stretching. I think about it as linking breath to the body, and that's just the start.
Yeah, right now in my life, I am deep in diapers and and dealing with feeling lucky to be dealing with my two younger kids.
Yeah.
And when I have, I don't know, dusted off those books in the mornings when I have time to do some reading, the thing that sticks out to me, I think, is just this concept of sattvic change. Mm-hmm. So changes you can make that are sustainable, changes you can make that you can stick with, right? Mm-hmm. And I just see the message of Desikachar's book is basically just feeling that now is the time to make a change, and wanting it badly enough to actually do it, and do it in a way that will stick with you. That's what I think of. I think of sattvic change. And, he talks about the obstacles to what the yogis considered as proper or accurate perception of the world. Mm-hmm. I think their view is that many of us, I'm sure, and I'm raise my hand as one of these people, or probably have some things clouding our perception so that maybe we're not seeing things quite as accurately as we can. And they give us a guidebook to remove some of those obstacles so that we can see things more clearly. Mm-hmm. And I find that just dusting off that book and going through several of especially the non-asana chapters, I find it calming. I find it, extremely calming and comforting to read.
Yeah, reassuring. And, as a new parent, you get a new perspective on how things need to change.
Oh yeah, I mean, you want to try to show up as best you can for your kids. The parenting, for those parents who are listening, or people that, talk about a group of people that's having health challenges right now. I think parents are at the top of the list.
Yeah, yeah, and it never stops. You want to show up as the best person for them forever, even when you're an empty nester. You especially want to show up. You want to show up, and you want to be able to keep up with them too.
Yeah, I know, it's a big motivation for me, for sure. And I know for most parents it is. It's tough. It's tough, and it's rewarding, and yeah.
Okay, I want to get back to medicine. This is a soapbox I've been getting on lately. What do you see as the biggest blind spot of allopathic medicine right now?
From my vantage point, from my little corner of the world, I would say that the biggest blind spot of functional medicine right now is these cholesterol and heart healthy eating debates. You talk to a lot of functional practitioners, and they're really willing to write off, elevated lipids, elevated LDL, elevated ApoB as being unimportant as long as the patient is insulin sensitive, meaning they have good glycemic control. And there's been studies that have been published even in the last few months that just, I know the statin thing. Look, I've tried to go on statins. I have side effects. I think statins have probably been overprescribed. I think that, unfortunately, allopathic physicians tend to dismiss people and don't hear them out and listen to their health concerns, and it causes a circle of lack of trust. And I get that, and I understand that, but I think that the dismissing the LDL cholesterol as causal in heart disease arguments is really at someone's peril. Now, I could talk just very briefly about the keto CTA study if you wanted me to, just give an overview, but
Sure.
Certainly. I mean, I would give the cliff notes of the cliff notes, but there was a theory that was being advanced in many lipid circles that if you had high LDL cholesterol but you had low blood sugar numbers, you were basically fine. The LDL cholesterol didn't matter. And they studied a population like this for a year, and they just showed catastrophic progression of heart disease during that time. So find your functional. My message is, find your functional, your favorite functional practitioner. They have so much to offer. It's a wonderful community. The one thing that I would be a little bit mindful of, and maybe try to incorporate some more allopathic, more traditional MD kind of thinking, is when it comes to the heart. The heart health metrics is my opinion.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I do, it makes me feel more comforted to hear you say that it is such an issue right now, because I'm for sure at that place with my patients and my menopausal women. It seems like we go through menopause as women and a switch flips, and LDL shoots up 50 points sometimes, and it's like, whoa, that just came out of left field. What's going on? And everything just suddenly changes. So trying to figure that out also, and maybe some mild statins. We have the natural statin that I put people on sometimes while we're trying to evaluate them, change their diet. And then there are new medications coming out, the PCSK9s, and they're even working on one for Lp(a), right?
Yeah, I mean, and somebody, myself, in terms of, women and all of us dealing with this, I mean, it's tough. It can be tough because a lot of people have really bad side effects when they go on a statin. There's other drugs that doctors can prescribe, but not everybody tolerates them.
Right.
So, some people will choose a natural compound like bergamot. I have mildly elevated lipoprotein A runs in my family. If anyone listening doesn't know what lipoprotein A is, it's worth a Google and a test. And there's some exciting stuff on the horizon. A drug to lower Lp(a) would be very welcome for so many people, because that's a genetic marker that tends to kind of be high and kind of stay high no matter what you do with diet. This is a real challenge for people, and that's where the functional community has so much wisdom. I mean, just to think you can always rely on a drug is tough, because you can't. But at the same time, even when you want to know, the drugs that do get prescribed, they just cause problems for people.
Yeah.
So it creates a bit of I think you said off the call, a bit of a whack-a-mole. It's tough it's a tough thing to manage.
Yeah. And knowing, as functional medicine providers, what I know is that there's a time and a place for pharmaceuticals, and this might be one of them. But we're there for our patients to listen, and if they don't want to do it, they know what the consequences could be.
Well, I would say one thing, and it's a little bit nerdy and in the weeds, but as like I mentioned, just another full circle moment, as I mentioned when getting started in this industry, this kind of field is Boston Heart Diagnostics. I mean, if you're hesitant to take a statin, it's interesting to go to a lab like Boston Heart, because they'll give you what's called a sterol panel, and a sterol panel is essentially just a way of teasing out why are you having high LDL. You really can't tell. I mean, there's genetic markers you can look at as well. And you can basically see some people, it's not the majority of people, but it's maybe 15 to 20% of people. So, again, a room of 100 people, you get 20 people that are going to stand up, and this is going to be an issue for them. It was also just written up in the Wall Street Journal. There was a big Wall Street Journal article on this issue. And, if you tend to hyperabsorb, hyperabsorb cholesterol, and then by extension it's the same pathway, you'd hyperabsorb phytosterols like avocados, nuts, seeds, plant fats. That can be a cause of high LDL that people generally don't know about. And a sterol panel will show you, you have high levels of these plant sterols, these plant fats in your blood. And the only way that they get there, your body doesn't make plant sterols. It makes cholesterol, but it doesn't make plant sterols. So therefore, if they're there, you absorb them. And that can be good and bad news. It's bad news because phytosterols are very damaging to to your arteries. But at the same time, the drug solution for a hyperabsorber is much more benign for most people than is the alternative pathway, which is the cholesterol production pathway. So if you find out you're hyperabsorber, you can take a drug called ezetimibe, which is Zetia for short. Right. And that's something that's very well tolerated. People, there's always people that have side effects, but it tends to be better tolerated. And so that's another place where knowing the why can be very empowering, because it can give you an option that you may not have known about that is gentler than what you thought you might have to take.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, John, it looks like you are out of time and we're getting close to time. And I want to thank you so much for being here and having this conversation that felt like it was all over the place, but I loved it.
I loved it too. And I think, if the conversation was all over the place, then I think that's a good thing. And I appreciate you inviting me on. It was a really pleasure to chat with you, and keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Beth.
And we'll be right back with more Rooted in Healing.
And now, more Rooted in Healing with Dr. Beth Claxton.
Hi, this is Dr. Beth. I hope that you enjoyed this interview with John O'Connor. Thanks for coming back for more. John can be found at mygenefood.com. He also has a podcast, which is not having any recent releases of episodes, but it's still a treasure trove of information. He has a blog that goes out weekly, and he, I believe, is still doing some interviews with very smart people in the field. So please, if you're interested in what he had to say, tune into what he is talking about, especially if you're one of those people that's bumping up around lipids in your cholesterol evaluations. John's product, called My Gene Food, is a nutrigenomic analysis. Like he said in the interview, there are about 20 different types of diets that the analysis recommends, and it's really to help people just begin to turn the right direction nutritionally into what would benefit their system the most. I honestly have found it very helpful, and it really confirmed intuitively for me that I was following what my body wanted. It's so difficult nowadays to hear so much different conflicting advice, but know that deep inside you're following what your body needs to. And with a little bit of direction, you'll be on a really good path to your own wellness journey. if you have any questions, if you want to chat, please log on to my website, bethclaxtonmd.com, click Become a Patient. And I would love to talk more with you about anything in this arena or any concerns that you're having. Please join us on Saturday mornings at 9 a.m. for Rooted in Healing. And we are on KAZM Mellow Mountain Radio, 106.5 FM and 780 AM. And until then, my hope is that you will keep finding and searching for that which makes you feel vibrant and healthy.